Welcome to the Market Mystics Podcast. I'm Joshua.
I'm Kim. Let's dive in. What up, everybody? Welcome back.
Welcome to the show.
Today we're going to talk about money, handling money, and childhood.
Mm-hmm. I think it'll be an interesting conversation because in other areas that Kim and I are involved in, we've dealt with kind of a mindset of entitlement. And I think one of the ways of dealing with entitlement is how you raise your children with money now.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about it from that angle. I mean, this topic was just proposed 15 seconds ago. But, I mean, I think, oh my gosh, my brain is going a million different places with entitlement because it's been this topic that's been swirling around a lot, at least in my life for the last couple of weeks. And I have to say that's just first and foremost, I've kind of landed a little bit in a place where I feel like entitlement is directly related to the level of responsibility someone is taking, willing to take, or has taken. And so I'm probably going to be coming from that viewpoint, although it might change by the time we're done having this conversation. We'll see.
Well, let's just first start with what was money like when you were a kid for you? Like not necessarily for your family, but how were you raised with money, and how does that how do you raise your kid? Did that follow through, or did you build off of that? Or I'm curious what your foundation was with that.
I feel like that's a tricky question. You said not how it was with my parents, but I'm going to talk about how it was with my parents, because I had two very different experiences with money as a child with my parents. So my parents split up when I was really small. I was one, and I never knew them together. And for the majority of me growing up, my mom, who I lived with primarily, was very, I would say, very poor, or at least that was the sense that I got. It was poverty. On the other side of things, my dad, who I saw on the weekends, was very well off. He was an entrepreneur and just kind of ran after his dreams and became very successful. And so money flowed very well over there, and it was like stopped up on the other side. So I had like these weird polar opposite views of money depending on where I was. But for me, having money as a child, I didn't ever earn an allowance that I can recall. If I did, it was very short-lived and not significant. But I did get money for birthdays, oh, you get $5 on your 5th birthday. Do you remember those days? Did that happen to anybody else's family? Just mine? It was like a very common birthday gift. Oh, you're turning 8, you get $8, whatever. So I would have money from birthdays, and then, just truth be told, my dad really liked to make bets with us. So I would win bets from my dad and then I would make money. I remember as a kid being like maybe 10 or 11 years old, and I had $100 bill, which was unheard of. I lived in a really small town. It was also not a terribly affluent community. And again, my mom and where I lived, we were kind of at poverty level, but somehow I had some money sometimes. And it was just a very mixed up thing. So even the way I'm describing it feels very mixed up, but it felt like kind of a very mixed up thing for me, because sometimes I felt this way about it and sometimes I felt that way about it. So I don't know that I have like the best foundations for money from which to even speak as a child. I don't know. What about you, Josh? I bet you had more structure.
Um, yeah, I mean, maybe more structure. My family did not do the allowance thing. Um, I will say I feel fortunate in that my needs were always provided for.
Yeah.
And my wants were provided for by doing chores or birthdays or something like that. Like so a special occasion or, a birthday or holiday or something, you could ask for what you wanted. But if there was something else that wasn't a need, then yeah, like that came from, I remember like, I think I was 5 and my dad owned a small business and I started like emptying trash cans and um, uh, doing other little small tasks that were possible to to get money. And so that was kind of my experience with money as a child, um, which I I feel very fortunate with my childhood and how I was raised and the mindsets that were instilled in me as a child. I feel very fortunate for that. Some of my issues with money more so came as an adult through relationships and the way other people looked at money, influencing the way I looked at money. And so, yeah, I think it's but I do think the way you raise children with money is important because there's a fine line between providing everything
Mm-hmm.
and there's a fine line between providing nothing.
Right.
And so it's like, do you like at the extremes, you get entitlement where you just deserve everything. The other extreme, you deserve nothing unless you work for it. And so your value comes from works. And somewhere in the middle, you get this like, I'm simply valuable for who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And I get to participate in my father's kingdom and, and yeah, participate in my father's kingdom and outworking things. Um,
Hmm.
and I think that could be different in every household. That could be different it could manifest itself differently for each child. Um, and I think
That's
can
true.
be a tricky thing too to know how to how to really deal with that in each child. And but I do think it's important to instill good money mindsets and good like work ethic within children because part of that will come in. I mean, that will come into play throughout their whole life. And I think of it like with the spirituality aspect that we bring in. um there's a lot of there can be a mindset in Western Christianity that I've experienced where people don't want to work for things because Jesus paid it all or it should be given to you by grace. And that can be really tough to work with, um, because I mean I look at it as like, okay, I don't know if exactly this will tie in. I think it does in my mind a little bit. We'll see. But the story of the prodigal son, the parable of the prodigal son, you have one son who leaves his father's kingdom. You have one son who stays in his father's kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time when I've heard that preached, the emphasis is on the sons. And I really think the emphasis of that story is the father. and his heart for his kids. And I think there's things you could learn through all three people of it. Um, but I think, when we're talking about how you raise children, I would expect both of the children in that parable had a similar upbringing, but they made different decisions for their lives based on it, based on those. And
Hmm.
it's really intriguing to me to be like, okay, well, how, like, you know, I've heard a lot of people preach that as like, well, you were once a sinner and now you're coming back into your father's kingdom. Like, great. Maybe there is truth in that. But now you get to, like, sort of be like the older son, but hopefully not hold the bitterness that he had towards his younger sibling because things were just given to him. Like, hopefully you learn from both of those.
Right.
And I think that's where my mind goes with, like, I don't have children of my own, so I don't know what it will be like when I do and how I raise them in that. But I hope that I can bring perspective and experience for them to position them where they can have the best of both worlds. It still is up to them to choose that. Like,
Sure. Let me ask you this, because you and I, Josh, we're both the youngest of two kids,
mhm,
right? So we both have similar upbringings as our siblings. Do you find yourself having different money mindset than your brother does?
definitely.
And how do you think that happens? What do you think made it different?
Mm.
Do you have any strongly similar things?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely aspects that are very, very similar, and there's aspects that express themselves differently. Um, and I don't know if I could tell you exactly what it is that makes them different, other than possibly just we experienced life differently.
Mhm.
And so, because we experienced life differently, we took different beliefs.
Sure. Sure. And what about the similarities? Do you think it's based solely on upbringing? Do you think there's something else that plays into that?
I think there's definitely a piece of the upbringing that pulls similarity for both of us. Um, I don't know that it's exclusively that, but um, I do think to at least some extent, the upbringing we had does give us something to, like, when we get together and we're talking about things, like, that tends to be the common ground. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and so, yeah, I think it probably provided a very similar thing. But I also think, like, this is important, is that, like, parents are constantly growing and changing. And so, what one kid may have experienced through the first few years of their life is probably going to be different than what the next kid experiences, than what the next kid experiences, than what the next kid experiences, because the parent hopefully is also growing at the same time.
Yeah.
And so I think that, like, yeah, that could attribute to the similarities and the differences that are there, at least to some degree.
Hmm. I think that's true. You and your brother are fairly far apart in age, aren't you?
Yeah.
How many years?
6.
6.
A little over 6.
My kids are 10 years apart. And you were saying parents are also constantly growing. My kids are 10 years apart. And though there are things that are very similar in how I've parented both of them, certainly with my youngest, there are also things that are different.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that they're different because of how I've evolved over time. But I also think about me and my sister and how we were 3 years apart, so not terribly far. And we have a lot of similarities as well when it comes to money mindset. But also, we're very different in a lot of ways too. Like, you would think polar opposites. But I also know that she has expressed to me before that, like my mom, who I was telling you, that side, it was like more like not well off, kind of low income bracket. We knew that we weren't well off. My sister has told me that my mom confided in her when we were young about that stuff, which she did not do that with me. And I think that also has painted kind of different trajectories in the ways in which we see money or handle finances or allow it to play the role in our lives. And I, as we're having this conversation, I'm saying, oh, this may have really directed that in that way. And I don't think it's like a good parenting move, bad parenting move. I don't think that's where I'm going with it. I just think that there are certain differences, even in the way that two children in the same household are being parented, and how those relationships kind of play out, kind of like how we talk with God or the Father. Like, if you're intimate with him, your relationship is going to look different than the next person's, right? Hopefully, because it's unique. It's like one of a kind. It is you and him. But I think it's the same with natural parents. And so it does really dictate how things can play out later in life. Now I'm going to switch gears and go to the way that I parent. First of all, I find it fascinating, like absolutely fascinating, intriguing, how different generations will, as a whole, shift how parenting happens with certain things, especially when it comes to like money and things. I see how my parents were parented by my grandparents. So they're boomers, and how it was significantly different. And then you see this big shift into, well, now we want to provide everything for our kids because we hardly got anything. And then you have this generation of kids who think that they deserve everything. And then I've seen a shift. I'll just be honest with my generation. I'm a millennial, shifting into a lot of like not making their kids take responsibility for anything. So it's like taking it even further than the boomers did to us. And then now we're taking it even further. Like, you shouldn't have to worry about any of these things ever. And that is all very stereotypical. I know that individuals are different, but as a whole, you've kind of like, they're kind of patterns you see and things going a certain way. And we could talk about participation trophies and all the things, right? But for me personally, with my kids, I'll tell you how I kind of deal with finances with them. For my son, who's my oldest, I didn't ever do allowance stuff with him. It has always been my stance, and this is with both of my kids, that if you want something like the toy or like the fun thing or, the non-necessity, that you ask for those things for your birthday and for Christmas. Like these two big gift giving times, at least in our family. And otherwise, if you want those things in between, you can ask. I will say no, but you can spend your own money on it. And so then there are opportunities to earn money, other than just receiving money as a gift on birthdays or Christmas or something like that. And that's kind of the way that I approach things. I also don't give allowance for what I would consider basic responsibility things, like poor Henry, he's 17, but for probably 10 years of his life, he asked for an allowance for cleaning his room. And I'm like, no, that's your responsibility. You do that. You don't get paid for it. It's because that's something that you are supposed to take care of, right? And now my youngest, who's 7, she does have opportunity for allowance, but she has to do certain tasks to earn it. So if she doesn't do it, she doesn't earn it. One of those things is poop scoop in the backyard because we have dogs. Let me tell you, it's a crappy job. And
Uh,
she doesn't love doing it. And so sometimes she doesn't get her allowance, but then she wants to spend money, but she doesn't have money. And so that's where that kind of tension comes in. And we get to talk about, like, if you want to buy things that you just want that aren't necessities, I buy, like, listen, I buy my kids food, I buy them clothing, shoes, like normal necessity things. It is well, I want this toy. Can I have it? No, you need to pay for that or ask for it for one of these gift giving events, right? But she's started learning that she can do things to then earn money to buy it for herself. And actually, she loves to pay for herself. And I kind of love that she loves to pay for herself with those things because she's made a point to earn the money, to keep it, like, to accumulate it to the amount of money that she needs to buy whatever specific thing it is she's wanting to buy. And then she gets to go hand over her cash or swipe her card. Yes, she has a debit card. It's one of those kid ones that the parent loads money onto it. So as she earns money, I can just transfer it to her. But she has also learned the responsibility of doing that and even going above and beyond, which I think speaks to some work ethic. I mean, just a couple weeks ago, I was cleaning in the kitchen and she jumped in and started helping and did like big things that I wouldn't normally ask her to do. Like she started like washing the outside of the refrigerator and getting some of those spots that are like deep clean places, not like normal everyday clean places. And so she earned extra money for it because she like went above and beyond normal responsibility duties and stuff. And I guess that's the way that I am choosing to parent. I don't know that I think it is the right way or if they will in 15 years look back and be like, man, my mom really missed it. But I'm trying my best. And I think that is really kind of the best we can do. So we take the stuff from our upbringings. Hopefully we learn good and bad from it. And then we implement it in the way that you think is most life-giving and healthy and will set your kids up for abundance in the future, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, we talk often about leveling up, and that's really what this is about. Like, can we take what we were given and level it up in our
Right.
lives? And then can we take what we were given and level it up in our kids' lives? Like, can we help move the next generation forward in a positive way?
Right.
And I think that um, yeah, that's really what this whole discussion is about. And I think really it's a desire to just raise awareness and like, yeah, like look at the way you were raised. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Because there's probably some similarities in how you're currently parenting, because that's just natural tendency.
Right.
Um, but I think we're offered an opportunity to level up our lives. And that would just be my call to people, is to like look for the level up opportunities.
I think that's good. It's innovation within family systems
Hmm.
and generational innovation. So you're taking what was already there and you're just improving upon it,
Right.
hopefully. Right. My question for you, Josh, would be how do you think you will parent your children since you haven't been there yet? Right. Do you have
Yeah.
like ideas in your head? Do you have anything like that?
Um, Yeah, like like I said, I'm not a parent, and so this is all theoretical and subject to change when I do have children. Um, but I there are aspects of how I was raised that I appreciated the what came from that.
Mhm.
Um, because I both learned that I was valuable for just being part of a family
Mhm.
and that work is a necessity. Um, and so I would like to instill similar things to my children. I don't know exactly how that will get outworked um, in their lives.
Sure. Sure. And honestly, I think it's an ever evolving thing anyway. Like
Right.
it almost has to be.
Mhm.
Like, do you not change almost daily in the ways in which you operate, even if it's just in one tiny little area of your life? Like, do things not continually evolve? Is it just me? I feel like I'm not the same today as I was yesterday, even if it's in the smallest little way.
I
Uh,
do think that's true. I think that is especially true if you are aware of your past. I think that's one of the biggest reasons that history is important is like, the common phrase history repeats itself.
mhm.
Like, I think that is true, especially if you don't remember what already happened,
Yeah.
which I think is really important to remember, like to look back on your life and say, where was I a year ago? Did I level up or did I stay in a similar pattern? And just that awareness of where you have been and where you want to be, I think really helps you shift out of the um, being stuck mindset.
Hmm, that's good. So, on a very practical level, like action oriented, practical level,
Mm-hmm.
if someone didn't love the way that they were brought up or the way their mindset is about money, how would you practically start shifting that?
I think one of the most important things people can do is reparent themselves um, in the
Not
ways,
repair, reparent, right?
reparent themselves in the way that they felt lacking. Um, and so if you developed negative mindsets around money, I think it's important to understand that there's part of who you are that probably still holds that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, consciously taking yourself and saying, hey, we need to address this mindset. We need to, like, what do you wish your parents would have done different? Like, start doing some of that with yourself. Um, and I really believe that because I think one of the most important things you can do is take responsibility for yourself. Um, I think shifting responsibility to other people to reparent you, um, although at times maybe could be helpful, I think often leads to just more disappointment. um, because you're just it's other humans. And not that you're going to get it right with yourself all the time. But I do think that a really important part of that is simply um, kind of like taking the opportunity to redo it with yourself. How do you wish it would have been done? We'll do it.
Mm-hmm. And for those who think, oh, I've already ruined everything, is there still hope?
I think there is always hope. I remember when we did, I think it was our first or second interview with Mark Wilburn. He talked about building family legacy and how um, sometimes people will be like, well, I just missed out on it because my family didn't leave me anything. And he was like, there's no better time to start than right now. Like, there's no better opportunity. There's for you to end generational curses, for you to change your family's mindset on money, on life, on whatever it is. There's no better opportunity than you right now.
I think so too. I think so even with parenting. Like if you feel like you've started down a road that is not ideal, not what you actually want to pass on to your kids, try again.
I think one of the most important things was just having a conversation with my wife about this, and she's reading this book on kids, and they found that if a parent did something they wish they wouldn't have, if the parent went to the child 2 out of 5 times that happened and just apologized and said, "Hey, I messed up. I didn't do that the way I should have." 2 out of 5 times made a marked impact on the child to where you could actually measure a difference.
Hmm.
And so I think taking responsibility is so important. I think it's the most important thing. You can either go through life and say, well, this is the hand I was dealt. That's just the way it's going to be. Or you can say, this is the hand I was dealt. Now I'm taking it and I will do something with it.
For sure. I like that you mentioned that she's reading in that book, because I was going to say something very similar. I think that even as a parent, even standing in an authority position, humility is so very important.
Yeah.
And allowing your kids to know that you are human and growing too, and that you make mistakes, but you know how to gracefully and humbly deal with them and acknowledge them and move on from them, I think can make such a big impact. So
Yeah.
even if you do everything wrong, it doesn't matter. How do you handle that?
Mm-hmm.
You
I
know?
think it's important for your kids to realize that you're not perfect, and
Right.
that, but I think it's important for them to realize that in the safety of, like, it's okay to make mistakes,
Right.
and mistakes don't mean the utter failure, or like, that failure doesn't always have to have a huge consequence.
It's not annihilation.
Right.
Failure doesn't mean annihilation.
Yeah.
Right? It also doesn't mean disqualification. It also doesn't mean a lack of authority. It also doesn't mean a lack of responsibility. But it does mean that you're human, you make mistakes, you're willing to learn from your mistakes and move on.
Yeah.
And I think that even more than most parenting things, I think that's really important.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. It's good stuff. This was a parenting episode. What the heck happened?
We got somewhere.
Okay. Well, thanks for joining today, guys. For parenting advice and more. Join us next time.
So good. Thank you for sticking around. Listen for new episodes every Monday and Thursday. Find us on all social media platforms by searching for Market Mystics. Don't forget to follow and subscribe. Visit upperroomcd.com, where you can find more information about the hosts, projects, and guests. Go deeper by booking a coaching appointment focused on redefining identity and wealth in your life. See you next time.